Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is my review of the new episode of the Orville titled Home. And the episode begins in the mess hall, and I noticed they replaced the cheap looking wooden tables from season 1 with much more futuristic and better looking tables, which also look very similar to the tables on the Enterprise D. But the chairs still look like cheap plastic chairs, but maybe it's deliberate because that's how it looked like in the original Star Trek show. So maybe it's on purpose, but I prefer that it looks as best as possible, so I do like the new tables. And this scene of Alara arm wrestling Isaac kind of reminds me of a scene in TNG in which Data was playing against an alien with everybody cheering around them. And as it turns out, Alara is getting weaker because she's been living on the Orville, but she comes from a planet with a much higher gravity, and I don't know why this really surprises anyone that she's getting weaker. I always assume that she has increased artificial gravity in her quarters so that she doesn't atrophy, but apparently that's not the case and they don't seem to be able to generate different gravity in different areas of the ship, except for the simulator room. And all of this reminds me of a Deep Space Nine episode which had the opposite idea. There was a crew member in a wheelchair because she came from a planet with very low gravity, so she could only move around in a wheelchair, except when in her quarters where gravity was normal for her. And sadly, I think that was the only episode in all of Star Trek which dealt with that idea of different gravity for different crew members, since they all come from different planets. I think it was never mentioned in any other episode in all of Star Trek. And Dr. Bashir offered her some kind of treatment so she could be like everybody else, but that also meant she won't be able to go back to her home planet, and so she had to make a choice if to come back to her planet or stay in Starfleet, which doesn't really make sense if you think about it, because why wouldn't she be able to go to a planet with lower gravity? It makes much more sense here in the Orville that Alara won't be able to go back to her planet, because the gravity is so much stronger there, so if she gets too weak then she won't be able to survive there, so it makes more sense here, I think. Also in that episode of Deep Space Nine they showed that that woman can turn her disadvantage into an advantage, since she was able to defeat a bad guy by turning off the gravity, and then she could jump around the room better than him. So I guess that was a commendable idea in Deep Space Nine, that they tried to show that even an invalid can still be a valuable crew member, but that was the only episode about that, and it never showed up again in any of the Star Trek shows. So I think that Deep Space Nine episode probably inspired some of the ideas in this Orville episode. So here Alara is told that she has to go back to her home planet to recover, otherwise she might never be able to go back there again. And as I predicted, that painting in her office was indeed her planet. And I love the way they made it look, because it has rings around it, which usually we know that only gas giants have rings, because they have such high gravity, and so they show the planet as being huge, with rings like a gas giant, but still looking Earth-like. And it also shows me that they are planning things out in advance in this show, because they showed that painting early on in the previous season. They did the same thing with the Maklans. They showed the paintings of their home planet in their quarters, which is really funny because it looked like a giant industrial zone, and that's exactly the way their entire planet looked like when we saw it later. So the same thing with Alara. And I love the look of the planet from space, and when they show the surface, and they made the planet look really big and massive, and we can see that it has a lot of moons as well. And at the same time it also looked like Earth, which makes sense if it has human looking creatures on it. And when they go down there with the shuttle they have to use gravity shields, and Ed has to wear an environmental suit to walk around the planet. And this is something that I always wanted to see on Star Trek, because on Star Trek they always show that all planets have normal gravity and everybody are always able to walk around normally without any problems. That one Deep Space Nine episode was probably the only exception I can think of. And so I love the fact that here they show us a planet with vastly different gravity. And the planet looked very beautiful, but my only complaint is that it didn't really look alien enough. Especially all the plant life, which looks totally normal to us. And if this planet has such a high gravity, then how come all the trees and flowers look exactly the same? So that bugged me a little bit. If I was a designer on the show, I would make sure to show all the plants as looking much tougher. Instead of all those weak looking trees, I would put like cactuses everywhere. I would paint them strange colors to look more alien, and I would make all the plants look much more like cactuses and something that looks much tougher, which would make much more sense since gravity is so much stronger. So why not make all the plants look tougher to be able to withstand that? Also, when we see the ocean there, we see normal looking waves, and if it's all normal water, then shouldn't it all be much more flattened out? So that also didn't seem to make sense. They should have shown the ocean as being totally flat without any waves. But aside from this minor nitpick, I love the way the planet looked. I love that everything was beautiful. And I just love the style of the show, that everything is bright, clear, beautiful. This is the way an optimistic version of the future should look like. This is so much better than the ugliness of Star Trek Discovery, in which everything is always dark or blue, and with shaky cam and lens flares and blurriness. I hate that style, and I love the style in the Orville. I also love that alien horse they showed. That was great and beautiful, and original, and creative, and imaginative. So that's the kind of stuff I want to see in a science fiction show. And there were a lot of beautiful shots on the planet, so overall I liked it. I just wish they showed us a little more clever details on the planet having to do with the gravity. They could have exploited the idea of the stronger gravity. They could have showed us little neat stuff, like for example show a leaf falling down from a tree, but falling down so fast that it's like a bullet crashing into the ground, something like that. They could have showed us a lot of neat little moments like that, which would have made it all much more imaginative and creative. The only scene showing the high gravity was when they threw a bottle outside of the gravity shields of the shuttle to watch it get crushed. That was pretty much the only neat moment like that they showed. And so Alara meets her parents and her father as being annoying, which is something Robert Picardo is always good at. And I don't like that they always refer to the Union fleet as the military. Didn't the Admiral in the first episode say that these are all exploratory vessels? So why is it suddenly being referred to as the military? And all the drama stuff with Alara was nice, but then suddenly this episode turned really dark really fast. Maybe too much, since this is supposed to be a fun comedy show, and yet suddenly turns into a complete horror show. And it was nice to see Phlox again. He's excellent playing evil and creepy. And another minor nitpick, why was Alara's dad struggling so much to carry Ed back to the shuttle? Shouldn't Ed seem extremely light for him? Because he doesn't have as much density, he shouldn't be as heavy as objects on this planet, even though he is in the gravity of the planet, but he should still be light for anyone from the planet. I guess maybe it's because his suit was malfunctioning, maybe it somehow made him heavier, I guess. But still, it's mistakes like this in the show that annoy me a little bit. I would have appreciated a lot more, I would have praised this show a lot more if it got its science a little bit better. I just made a parody edit on my other channel showing the scene in which Alara was reshaping solid titanium into a ball and then giving it to Kelly. And Kelly takes it with no problem, but shouldn't it be super hot after she did that? So that was scientifically incorrect and also a missed opportunity to make a joke from it. So little mistakes like that always annoy me. I would have appreciated much more if they paid attention to these little details, and also it would have been much more educational to show something correctly, and they could have even used that for a joke, so it was a totally missed opportunity. So I'm always annoyed by little stuff like this. And so here when he came to rescue Ed, they should have shown him kind of lift him with one hand without problem, because it should have been so much lighter for him. I did like seeing that Ed gets his legs crushed by the gravity. That was great. I was hoping to see that happen. So that was fun, and yeah, I'm a sick bastard, I guess. But I like that not because of the horror of it. I liked it because they finally exploited the fact of the different gravity to show something neat and unusual. So anyway, Alara defeats the evil Phlox and shows that she's still useful, which is kind of similar to that Deep Space Nine episode. And the ending of the episode was pretty sad because they showed that Alara decides to stay on her planet. So she says goodbye to the crew, and that's really sad, and I don't think the show will be the same without her. I really hope we'll see her again in the future. She was one of the best characters, also very good eye candy, so it's really a shame, but this might also be an opportunity to shake things up with the crew. And the new alien security officer seems kind of annoying and obnoxious, but I guess he's supposed to be that way for comic relief, but I didn't really find him that funny. I guess we'll have to wait and see what they do with him. Now, I like the fact that they actually explained his tube thing going into his belly, because that seemed kind of stupid, and I was worried it's just that way for no reason. By the way, in that same Deep Space Nine episode I mentioned, there was an alien who had his nose connected to his chin for no reason, and that was really stupid, because that actually interferes in his eating, so why is that there? And so maybe that also inspired this alien who has his nose connected to his belly. But I love the fact that they actually explained this, and they said that he basically digests everything twice. So he's basically eating stuff that he digested already, so that's kind of gross but interesting. And I wonder if he can actually disconnect his tube from his belly, because then he can use it as a trunk, to use it like an elephant basically. That would be much more useful and much more interesting. Also, I found it a bit odd that Ed was worried that there are no uniforms suited for that guy, but we've previously seen that they have replicators on the ship that can create any clothes you need. Also, all he really needs to do is just make a hole in a normal uniform, so I don't understand the problem. Also, he can just replicate whatever uniform he needs, so why was this even raised? Speaking of strange alien crew members, there was a quick mention of Yaphet getting ready to split in two, which is his method of reproduction. So I'm guessing once he splits into two new creatures, he'll be voiced by two new actors. So overall, this was a good episode and a lot of beautiful shots, a lot of beautiful scenes, and my only criticism is that lack of scientifically accurate and visually interesting things. But I do love the fact that they showed the planet with a different gravity, and they said that not all the aliens come from the same kind of environment. They all come from different planets and have different needs, and so I do love the idea of this episode. And visually it was beautiful in a lot of places, and I love the style of the show so much more than the ugly style of Star Trek Discovery and a lot of other newer shows. And I so much prefer that old, clean, neat looking style so much better and so much pleasant to look at. So these are my thoughts about this episode. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.